Hello, my name is Professor William Lemon. I've been here at Post for several years, and I've been teaching literature and composition primarily. And this course is one of those things I get to do very often. It's one of those dream come true type things. And so I just wanted to kind of introduce myself, introduce these kind of video announcements, and then also answer the discussion board here as well to give you a little insight into why I write. So, first and foremost, let's talk about these. Well, I want to create a class that has the benefits of online learning, but the community feeling of an in-person college course. And so one of the ways that I can help facilitate that goal is by doing weekly discussion posts, and sometimes up to two, video discussion posts where I talk about maybe supplementary concepts or just go over the concepts of the week. And I hope that this kind of mimics the in-class discussion that you might get in an in-person classroom, and then also feel like you're connected and you know who your professor is and you know what they sound like, what they look like, and so that they're not just sort of a little icon on a screen. And so I'm going to be doing these to try to help make this more personal to you as the student. And so that being said, if there's ever something you'd like for me to go over in more detail, whether it's a concept or an assignment or something we're reading, whatever it is, please just email me and I can make a new one of these where I am, kind of going over the material in a more direct way via the video. So, please take advantage of this, and I'm more than happy to do them as long as people ask for them. So now that I've kind of introduced these videos, I wanted to talk about why I write. And so let me give you a little history about me as a writer. And so I'm going to start very early. So I was one of those kids who would always kind of make up stories and, write them down sometimes. I remember, getting a computer and writing comic books, scripts for comic books because I couldn't draw on this old computer in the mid 90s, and just sort of not knowing how to save them, and they would just always disappear. And I just did it for fun though. And then I was, also had, the action figures and make stories with those, and, collect cards, baseball, basketball cards, and make up stories and scenarios with them, like, trades and teams and all sorts of things. And so I was always really interested in storytelling as a kid, yet the problem I always felt is I never thought I was good at writing. When I was in high school, I was not an exceptional English student. I was not, like, my teachers did not come to me and, pat me on the shoulder and go, wow, you're really, putting in the work, William. I always felt kind of I was a bad writer, and quite frankly. And when I got to college, I chose to really start low. At the school that I went to, it was a self-placement where if you wanted to take remedial English, you could, and I did that because I felt like I wasn't ready. In the end, I think it benefited me because I was just exposed to more reading and more writing. And by the second and third English class, I started thinking, like, wait a minute, things are clicking. I really liked storytelling when I was younger, and this I'm seeming to get better, and I understand it more, and I like it, and I feel like I have a passion for it. Maybe I should pursue this. And so I changed my major, and I, went to a program where when I was getting my master's, I wanted to do creative writing, and then also literary criticism, which is kind of hard to kind of find because normally they want you to kind of focus on one or the other. And so my thesis for my master's was all about kind of creative writing, but mixed with sort of creative theory and kind of weaving the two together. And so that's where I kind of really kind of solidified my love of creative writing. After college, like most college graduates, I thought all I had to do to get published was, just take my story and just wave it around, and someone would come by and grab it. It's a lot harder than that, and so it took me a long time to really work at my craft to get to a point where I could publish stories and kind of find out who I was as a writer. As a young writer, I was very sort of into being J.D. Salinger for some reason or another, thinking that's how you're supposed to write and that's what you're supposed to write about, these sort of family dramas. And after time, I realized, hey, I like Kurt Vonnegut a little bit more, and authors like that. And so I feel like I really found my voice writing something called speculative fiction, which in kind of, very broad terms is where you speculate on a particular society, or, what if blank were true, what if we had this, or, and so I sort of kind of have been writing that primarily for the past couple years, and I mainly write short stories because I feel like that's sort of what I'm passionate about at the moment. Yeah, I have written poetry and other things too, but short stories are kind of what I always seem to come back to because I just love kind of creating worlds in this really condensed way. And so that's my story basically. In terms of why I'm passionate about it, I just love kind of creating, and I love telling stories, and being able to kind of tinker around, and it feels like really you're building this universe, and to be able to do that is a lot of fun, and it's something that I really look forward to, and I'm not going to say it's always easy, I'm not going to say it's always fun, but it's something that gives me great pleasure in life. And in terms of my habits, because I really think it's important to establish habits as a writer, I write for a little over an hour each morning. I do take 2 days off to kind of recoup and kind of brainstorm and think about ideas for the next week. But I think it's important to be very consistent about your writing, and so I write at the same time each morning before my daughter wakes up, before my wife wakes up, before I go to work, and it makes me feel great because I feel like I've accomplished something before the sun's up. And so I'm not saying that you have to do that for this class, but I do believe that if you came up with some sort of routine for writing for this next 8 weeks, it would make your life a lot better, and you're going to see a lot of improvements in yourself as a writer. Whenever I hear Stephen King interviewed, he always just talks about just like the daily grind of it. I remember him and Martin from the Game of Thrones series. He was talking about how do you write so many books, and Stephen King was just like, it's a numbers game. If I write 1,000 words a day, and a novel is 60,000 words or 100,000 words, that's 60 to 100 days, and then I'm done, and I can go on to the next thing. And so, establishing a habit and a routine, I think, will really help you. And, you might not always like it. There's some mornings where I need a lot more coffee than others, but I really find that it's rewarding, and it gives me a sense of accomplishment, and it's something that gives me pleasure, quite frankly. All right, so let me tell you about my favorite writers. I'm trying to see if you can see some of them in the back over here. I mentioned Kurt Vonnegut. Kurt Vonnegut is probably, I don't know if I would say he's my number one favorite writer, but he's got to be in my top three. Um, what speaks to me about Kurt Vonnegut is his sense of vulnerability and also authenticity. And the fact that he's able to be vulnerable is what makes him authentic, I think, to me. And so if you look at something like Slaughterhouse Five, which he is best known for, he talks about how he tried to write it so many different times in so many different ways. And, when he was trying to write it as sort of like a straightforward, you know, story about his experience in the firebombing at Dresden, he couldn't do it, and it just didn't work for him. And he found ways to incorporate all this crazy stuff about aliens and time travel and all sorts of things into this story that's very real and very sort of visceral. And so to me, that I like that idea of being able to tell something that's really authentic and really personal, but also weave in all this other stuff that's so creative and interesting and unique. And so that's something that I really aspire to, is the idea of being able to do something like that. And so, and sort of in the vein of Kurt Vonnegut, if you've read him before, obviously if you haven't, you should at least go through the basics of creative writing in terms of the resources this week. And I would highly recommend, of course, Slaughterhouse Five and Cat's Cradle and things like this. And then kind of stretching out from there, people like Don DeLillo, who does not have the same sense of humor by any means as Kurt Vonnegut, but is sort of, sly and funny in his own way, and very sort of poignant about modern America, is Don DeLillo. George Saunders is another favorite of mine, who's a lot funnier, and not so much his newer stuff, but kind of his older stuff, and I feel like he really kind of hits the same nerves as Vonnegut. Margaret Atwood is another person who I really admire, kind of going back to what I was saying about Kurt Vonnegut. Everything I said about Kurt Vonnegut, you can put that on to The Handmaid's Tale, which is, this hugely popular television series at the moment. And so these are all sorts of, writers that really inspire me to keep doing this and to keep moving on. And yeah, and so, well, thank you for listening, and thank you for doing this class. I know for some of you this might be a little bit outside of what you're used to, and if you just kind of trust the process, I think you'll have a really great time in this class. I want to make this as personal as possible. When we're thinking about feedback for writers, oh man, getting feedback is tough, I think, for creative writing, more so than any other thing, because of how personal it is. And so I just want to tell you that I'm going to be as sensitive as possible in this area. And quite frankly, I would really prefer to do a lot of the conversations and feedback stuff over the phone or on Skype, or, even making me a video for you of your stories, because I really want to make it, have some generosity there in terms of time, because I know how hard this stuff can be, and just getting a couple terse sentences about your writing is not normally sufficient in order to become a better creative writer. And so I'm going to try to make every effort I can to really give you that sort of personal feedback that's not just written, that's, phone calls and things like that. So if you want it, it's available, and I'm going to try to extend that olive branch to really try to foster that sort of sense of community. All right, so this is getting a little long, so I'm going to cut it off there, but I want you to thank you so much for watching this and also being in this course, and I really look forward to working with you. Bye.